Hello everyone, I just wanted to make a quick video talking about Figma, all of the changes that have happened, and my thoughts since Figma AI was released. So I really appreciate Figma as a piece of software and as a company. I think as a company, I've seen some more recent changes that I'm honestly a bit concerned about. But stepping back, when Figma came out, I've used a lot of different tools over the past. I started using Photoshop when I was 14, so super early, and I went through many versions of Photoshop from like 1.0 all the way through whatever it was 8 or 9 when it turned into Cloud Suite. And so I used a lot of Adobe. I used Fireworks when it was like Macromedia before Adobe bought them out. So before Figma, Adobe also tried to buy another pretty dominant graphic design suite back in the day. So this play of like acquiring the design tool to stay on top is not anything new. It happened a long time ago. So yeah, I'd used Fireworks, I've used Photoshop, then I used Sketch when it first came out, and then as I started managing like larger teams, you had to have some sort of multiplayer or some sort of versioning on top of Sketch, because without it you would override each other's changes. You had to literally like save to like a Dropbox folder or whatever, and it was a real pain in the butt. So then Abstract came out, which was this application that would sort of sync with Sketch most of the time, and it would allow you to kind of check in changes. It was very much like Git for designers, basically. But there were times where when I was managing a larger team at Block One, we would still like lose changes. Sometimes we'd lose like 3 or 4 days worth of changes from one individual, and that would be so incredibly painful. So it was around that time when I was managing a larger team where Figma, we were like, okay, let's check this out. It was like the new kid on the block. And we're like, okay, this is super different, but it's sort of interesting. And the multiplayer mode made a ton of sense. So when they brought the multiplayer mode where you could have multiple cursors, you could see what people were working on, it really revolutionized design because it went from a single player game to a multiplayer game. And that was a real kind of secret sauce that Figma brought. But I think I would argue the bigger change that Figma brought was they really embraced the design community. They kind of just bear hugged the entire design community. And designers are different, right? With developers, they're all really interested in the latest technology. Are you on the latest tech stack? Do you know the latest techniques? Can you show me how to do something I've never done before? With product managers, it's like, what are your systems or your templates? How do you manage a team? How do you communicate metrics growth and land projects ahead of deadlines? But for designers, I think empathy is at the core of what we do. We try to get into the heads of users. We try to build inclusive, accessible, and really delightful experiences for everyone. And so Figma understood that from day one, and I think that's due to Dylan and his focus on understanding design from the very get-go. And so Figma was always about not just like a product, but it's like, hey, we're all in this together. We're the design community. We're going to embrace that. It's the idea of community, allowing people to develop plugins. Kind of the Figma ecosystem grew out of the passion that the design community put into it. And that very intentional choice at the very beginning, I think, was one of the really unique differentiators to Figma and every other design tool that came out before it. And so I think now you do have some sort of competitors in the space. You have PenPod and Creati and a bunch of different AI tools that I would say are not like specifically focused on complete UI creation. But Figma did kind of, and I would say Sketch and even Fireworks, they're primarily vector tools. So they do what you can do in code. So it's HTML, XML, and SVGs primarily. They do allow imports of, kind of raster images, but you can't really do much with them. Not like Photoshop. You're not editing pixels. You're editing mathematic points in space, basically. And so that was a little bit limiting, but then people got used to the fact that you could inspect and see CSS, and you could, eventually see Kotlin and Swift and other languages. So the idea that you could, inspect in a tool that was created in HTML and CSS, and you could see the output in HTML and CSS, I think that really, really helped designers think more along the lines of the constraints of developers. Whereas in Photoshop, you could create basically anything, and it would be a lot of translation to get it into something that was viable to be coded. Now, I think where Figma is at this point, they had the potential merger with Adobe, and I was really concerned about that. I had tried out XD, but it was clear it was an inferior product, and they weren't really keeping up with Figma's innovation. Figma was listening to the community, and they were innovating in the space and creating things that really made our lives a lot easier. And then as designers, allowed us to leverage our time through systems, through design systems, componentization, variables, and variants, like all the different, auto layout was such a game changer to be able to embrace Flexbox in a way to teach designers how developers, really good front-end developers, would lay out designs. And so I think after Adobe, was whatever happened, whether they were not allowed or whether there's some sort of fallout, we don't really know exactly, but it didn't work out. And Figma got their $1 billion breakup fee, and they were going to get acquired for like over $20 billion, but they didn't. And so I think that to a certain degree kind of reset where Figma was going, with being able to introduce multiplayer into all of the different apps potentially. Like imagine After Effects with multiplayer, all of the other Premiere with multiplayer, all of their main apps, even Photoshop maybe. Could have been potentially really interesting. And then thinking about how to leverage the Figma community. Of course, the licensing model is totally different with Adobe. It's very focused on enterprise and seats. And Figma is as well, but it has kind of a different pricing model that's a lot more beginner friendly. With Adobe, like if you want one product, it's very cost ineffective. And once you want more than one, you basically have to buy the entire thing. And then it's like pretty expensive on a monthly basis for an individual freelancer. So it was less accessible and a little bit more difficult. And then there was a lot of concern in the design community of like whether Adobe would mess up the kind of secret ingredients of Figma's real design embracement of the community. And also the fact that a lot of Adobe products are a lot less stable than Figma. Figma's extremely stable. They haven't really had any major like wide-scale corruption issues. They don't crash very often. They update the software quite frequently, and it works across the web in a browser. It works in native. They have native apps for desktop, for iOS, for Android. It works on Windows. It works on Mac. So there's huge compatibility. It's very cross-platform. And I think the design community was really concerned and nervous about how this would change Figma. Would it start to become overly complicated and complex? So now the point that they're at now is I think they had a taste of what that acquisition could look like, not only for the employees inside Figma who obviously want to cash out their equity, but also for leadership at Figma, really embracing the potential that they have to garner really large scale revenue growth. And so I think with the introduction of AI or ChatGPT over the last couple of years, designers have really embraced AI, but they've always embraced it from the direction that they want to provide their own creative inputs, their own prompting, their own vision, and have AI be kind of a force multiplier to help them create their desired effect faster, or maybe with higher quality, or maybe extend their skill set just a bit. But they don't want necessarily AI to completely create an entire campaign for them. They don't want to hit a magic button and just have something pop out. And I think those of us who are more senior, we've been in this game for potentially decades, we're really concerned about AI kind of making us all dumber, right? I think this has been the endless concern, right, with the internet or TV or video games. Everything's gonna dumb us down, and we're not gonna think for ourselves. But I think with AI, it does potentially, depending on how it's implemented, it has the potential to take away the creative spark where we just start relying on the AI to be the creative force. We always have had to be curators, but I think we've also had to be generators as well and content creators. And so my view of how Figma introduced AI, I think, was a bit of a misstep, and I think we can all kind of see that now. They're starting to roll things back, and they've run into some issues with plagiarism, and potentially the data it was trained on was not the most diverse or the most high quality. When I first saw the kind of demo previews that were making their rounds on LinkedIn and Twitter, I was really impressed because it was kind of taking like a component, and then it was allowing you to press an AI button and then see that extended with like more variants. So like a button, you could see all the different states. It would just generate them for you. I'm like, oh, that's great. You know, if it could generate kind of like the icon generator plugin, it could create different sizes or maybe handle stroke weights or name my layers or do things like write descriptions that are more keyword friendly and SEO friendly for people looking for components and design elements like icons. Like that would be really helpful, right? Help extend my time and help me get things accomplished in a more timely fashion. But that's not really, after they waited for many months, they came in and they're like, here it is. It just felt kind of like a cheaper implementation than I was expecting. It's just like type in a box and it gives you the entire UI. And I was like, ooh, first of all, the demo didn't go that well. And so I think what was output was not really that exciting and interesting. But then also it's like you're taking away all the creative force from designers, whereas you could leverage what people are already doing. The reason I love systems is because I can obsess over accessibility, performance, long-term, lower maintenance costs, and I can create something that is inherently a great user experience. And I can encapsulate that into a component that can then be utilized to hundreds or even thousands of designers, and equally so developers as well. And so my work has greater reach, it has greater impact. And then I'm also able to educate by the way that I organize and the way that I structure and name, run naming conventions on components. And so my hope was that I would be able to make those opinionated choices, build that into a design system. And then like a lot of large scale, like FANG companies, they have internal plugins where you can basically like type into a box and it'll create a template, or it'll create maybe like a higher level molecule or organism from those base atomic components. And that would be extremely helpful because you've already determined what is the best experience, and then you're just helping kind of scale those opinions out to a specific template or a specific flow or specific use case, which could really help force multiply the impact of product designers, and also help potentially in the educational handoff to, from system designers to product designers, or from system designers to engineers. And so I think they could have taken kind of a half step and then seen how the community utilizes technology by allowing them to hook up their own design system, and then allow natural language to develop something that's kind of like a higher order set of designs. So that's where I'm hoping they'll rewind and end up at. And then I think as far as like what went wrong, I think two problems I see. One, it seems like they trained on a very limited data set. They just used kind of a OpenAI kind of out of the box LLM model that wasn't trained very well. So with all that time, I don't know what they were doing, but I think they could have trained on a larger data set, something like Mobbin, versus just like a set of Apple apps. Like the weather app was coming up quite significantly and quite often. And then allowing kind of like, they allow style guides, but when I saw that demo where you could change the fonts and you could change the colors and the radiusing, it just reminded me of like Squarespace or Wix. It's like we already have those. We already have drag and drop builders with styling, and it felt very cheap. It kind of felt like it was cheapening the art of what designers do. If you want to use Wix or Squarespace, that exists now. You don't need a designer for that. And the idea of just generating the entire UI and then going and tweaking the kind of design treatments, is like, you're not really designing at that point. It's just window dressing. So I thought that was kind of a mistake as well. And then, the plagiarism issue obviously came up, and so that's a huge issue. And then there's the privacy issue of, hey, we're going to train on your data unless you opt out. I think that felt like everything up to this point, the incentives for Figma and the design community were running in the same direction. They were kind of all rowing together. But as soon as they said, hey, we're going to start training on your data, the fear hit of, okay, are they training on a data so that they can hand over to OpenAI, or in partnership with Figma, they could have this kind of AI designer. And therefore, they could say to PMs, heads of engineering, and leadership of organizations, like, you actually don't need designers. Like, we are the AI designers, and you could completely be replaced or augmented, which would obviously lead to huge layoffs and issues like that. And the other issue is, people already, I think, with design thinking, I'm not a huge fan of design thinking. I prefer other more traditional forms of UX training, human factors, Don Norman and the like. But I think with design thinking, the concept, what I think was a bit flawed, and it was like, hey, here's some foundational principles of experimentation, scientific method, and double diamond. And if you just understand these, then without any formal training, without any art background, without putting in the work, without experimenting and failing a lot, you could be a designer too. Anyone could be a designer. And so I think it kind of cheapened the role of that specific discipline. I might go out and lay some pavers, but that doesn't mean I'm a masonry expert, right? And I wouldn't trust my own work unless I put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to do an excellent job. And so I think we need to step back from, we do want to be super inclusive of everyone, but we do need to also respect certain specialty disciplines and respect the work that they put in, right? Even if they've only been doing it for several years, like, they're putting in that blood, sweat, and tears, and we should respect the job that they're doing, and we shouldn't minimize the work that a PM does, or a front-end engineer, or back-end engineer, or DevOps operator, system product designer, etc., visual designer. I think we need to stop the infighting. We need to respect each other's specific disciplines and move forward. And with this AI, I think if it's incorrectly implemented, kind of along the lines of what had rolled out, I could see someone who thinks they understand design well enough, which we already have some of those issues with certain disciplines. I think, PMs obviously come up quite a bit because there's some overlap. Somebody who has access to requirements, if Figma gets access to the business context and it can kind of see and view inside the organization some of the documentation and some of the requirements documents, you could see where a PM could just type in a box and say, okay, I don't need a designer. This layout's good enough. Go ahead and ship it. I think what that's going to do is it's going to really cause a huge influx of terrible user experience and really bad solutions. And I think we've seen a regression of user experience in the last several years, which is kind of surprising and shocking. I think as prices have gone up and people are, companies are trying to cut back after what Elon did at X, and other founders going, well, maybe I could cut my entire force by 75% too. User experience has gotten trimmed a lot. Dark patterns have emerged quite significantly. And I think user experience as a whole, we've started to regress. We've started to take a step back. And I think with AI, that step back could become a leap back. And something that we need to be kind of aware of and concerned of. Moving forward, there are opportunities for Figma to right the ship. I think if they do that quickly, I'm glad that they rolled back their AI. I hope that they think really deeply about putting their alignment and their incentives in the same direction as the design community, right? Like, how can we further the field? How can we sell our assets, our design resources, our systems, our courses, monetizing along those lines versus only listening to large enterprises and their needs for large teams, how to raise prices, how to increase the need for more and more seats with some of their licensing models, where if you're in different organizations, the same person could have to pay twice for seats. I think they need to fix those billing issues, and they need to start aligning themselves again with the interests of the designers. So yeah, a lot of designers don't just work for Apple and the big FANG companies, but they might work in an agency where they work for a lot of clients, or they might work as consultants, or they might work as independent contractors or freelancers. And so they're all kind of interested in how do they promote their own brands, how do they become well known, and how do they share their expertise in their design and be able to monetize it. So I think for other companies like PenPot, there's a huge opportunity right now to lean into a kind of paid marketplace a la Shopify. And I think with a couple of changes to, I know Sketch is coming out with auto layout, they just said, but they really need better, more robust design system tooling. They need to kind of come on par with where Figma is, and Penpot too. Whether they need multiplayer, I know Penpot is kind of open source and you can run a local instance. If you're on a larger team, you're probably on Figma. If you're on a solopreneur team, it's probably more cost effective for you to look at something like Penpot or another alternative. So I think they should lean into some of the like smaller, more freelance designer focused use cases and user personas, and make sure that they have backwards compatibility in the output of design, so that for these freelancers that are sharing with like larger organizations, they can have a way to translate over to Figma, which I think would be really, really needed. But build a community, build the ability to have on par the same level of design plugins, design system library, functionality, variance variables, something akin to that, and auto layout. And then I think there's a big opportunity also to be able to export code. So I think somebody like a Framer or Webflow, I think Framer specifically, if they open up their code access, they have an opportunity to steal a lot of addressable market from Figma. The issue I have with Framer, they have incredible outputs. The design creativity is second to none. Like their integration with Spline, where you can kind of have 3D models flying around tied to the parallax smooth scrolling ability. Like all of that is amazing. But the issue I have is I'm locked into an ecosystem if I don't have access to the source code. That's a huge deal breaker. And I think somebody needs to come along that ties in just enough design and just enough code with giving you the ability to own your own exported deliverables and outputs. So basically code. Whoever does that well and embraces a community around that could definitely steal a lot of market share, I think, from Figma in the long run. But ultimately, Figma, it's their game to lose. They have an incredible product. I love Figma. I use it every single day. And I really hope for their sake that they step back, listen to the community, maybe slow down on AI, and think about ways to do it in a more holistic manner that doesn't replace design, but it really augments and saves us time on things that we don't want to do ourselves. And I think don't worry so much about the blank canvas. Most of us have gotten to the point where we're not afraid of a blank canvas. We're not afraid to start a creative endeavor. And if you embrace that hyper beginner where they've never designed at all, I think they're losing the core of their market, and they're trying to become more like a Wix or a Squarespace, and that's just not who you're serving. So I would say, best of luck to Figma. They're crushing it. Embrace the design community. Embrace some of the UX problems too at your conferences. I'd say Config is great if you work for a huge company and they're in the Bay Area, probably getting it paid for, and it's easier to just pop over, but you're only listening to part of the design community that's inside the room. So make sure that you're hearing the voices outside as well, and that you're tied to their success and generating high quality output in their careers. With that, I'll end there. Those are my thoughts on Figma. The Adobe stuff with their licensing is wild too. And I think ultimately, you shouldn't be training an AI model. These companies, you pay them every month. If it was free, a free product, I could see them asking for you to train an AI model to replace you. But if you're literally paying their R&D budget, they should be grateful for that. There should be more local LLM models. There should be more models that are generating off of things I've already been opinionated about and chose as locked in and good and high quality. So those are my thoughts. Take care, guys. Let me know in the comments what you think about all of this. I know there was a lot of strong opinions loosely held, and I could definitely be wrong on some of these things. So if you hear something that sounds off to you, I'd love to hear your opinion on Figma, Adobe, design tools. Ultimately, these are just tools. Your skills are the most important, and the only way to really improve is to get out there and do a lot of great design work. So good luck, and I look forward to seeing more from you guys. Take care.